What is up, you guys? Vivi here from the Hunter Park campus, and I just want to say what's up to everyone that's here joining us from wherever you're at, whatever campus. But really quick, I do just want to jump into today's message because we are at a crossroads here at Sandals Youth. And not just youth as a whole, like all of the campuses together, but I literally mean like you being here, joining us tonight, a part of Sandals Youth, because we are at a crossroads. And if you've been joining us the last few weeks, and even actually month and a half, you will know that we've been in this series that is all about basically just understanding ourselves so that we can change the way that we relate to people. And it has been such a good series, but here's where the crossroads is at. Is that series is either gonna be just a series that gives us a list of excuses, or it's gonna be the thing that launches us into somewhere that we've never been before. And so I'm gonna have a moment of being real, because here at Sandals Church, we are all about this vision of being real. Is that us as people, we are so prone to just settling for what's understandable, settling for the excuses. But here is what happens, is that when we settle in what's understandable, we miss out on the unimaginable things that God has for us. And this is why I'm so stoked that we are starting this brand new series for the next 3 weeks, because this series is called Kingdom Workers. But this is why I'm excited, because I believe that what God has meant for us is far more than what was meant for us to see on our own. But here's the thing again, we settle for the understanding, we settle for the little things, and we miss out on the things that God has meant for us. But again, we can't see those things on our own. And here's what happens is that we completely forget those things because we just focus on ourselves. And so I just want to say this, that we can't have what God has meant for us without having Jesus. And if you don't know Jesus, man, I do. And I don't know what your story is, and I don't know maybe what that more in your life is. Maybe what the unimaginable things that God has for you, I don't know what those are, but I do know Jesus. And if you're here today and maybe you do know Jesus, man, let this be just a reminder, and not just a reminder, but something that might refuel for what you know Jesus to be. And so to everyone in here, I want you to lean in and listen up really quick, because again, if you don't know who Jesus is, we're gonna take a look and just see just a picture of what his heart is. So we're in John 13. If you don't know the book of John, it's one of the Gospels. And this is one of my favorite scenes because it's one of the scenes where you literally get to see the way Jesus relates to people. That it's not just God in heaven, this and that, but you literally get to see how he relates to people. So chapter 13, verse 1 says this: before the Passover celebration, Jesus knew that his hour had come to leave this world and return to his Father. He had loved his disciples during his ministry on earth, and now he loved them to the very end. It was time for supper, and the devil had already prompted Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had given him authority over everything, and that he had come from God and would return to God. So he got up from the table, took off his robe, wrapped a towel around his waist, and poured water into a basin. Then he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with a towel he had around him. When Jesus came to Simon Peter, Peter said to him, "Lord, are you gonna wash my feet?" And Jesus replied, "You don't understand now what I'm doing, but someday you will." "No," Peter protested. "You will never, ever wash my feet." And I'm gonna pause right there because I just wanna say, this is just a story, yes, where Jesus is talking about washing his disciples. And to all of us, I'm like, that's a big deal. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I am not the type of person that walks into a room and is like, "Hey, let me wash your feet." Like, I'd be looking at those, let me wash them. That's not me at all. And let me be clear, it's not no, it's not you, it's me. Let me be clear, it is you. Like, I don't know where you put your feet. Yes, we're Sandals Church. Think about it. Like, people be wearing slippers and sandals and weird stuff. I don't know what you do with your feet. I don't know if you wear socks. I don't know. Again, let me be clear, it's not me, it is you. And it's a big deal for us, but then we get this. It was a big deal for the disciples too. Because here's the thing about feet washing. If you don't know their tradition, if you don't know their culture, to wash someone's feet was literally something that only the lowest of people would do. And then when you think about the disciples having their feet washed by Jesus, literally what a disciple means is to be a learner. So they were learning from Jesus. So to have literally the guy that they're learning from be the one that's washing their feet, man, like this was something that blew everyone's mind. And I think what's so cool about this story too is that it's literally a picture of what it looks like and how we are saved. That it's not anything that we do, but it's because of Jesus. It's literally God making himself less so that he could make us more because of Jesus. And it is such a cool story, but all that to say, for us, it's a big deal. For the disciples, it's a big deal. They were shook, so let's keep reading. Jesus replied, "Unless I wash you, you won't belong to me." Simon Peter exclaimed, "Then wash my hands and head as well. Lord, not just my feet." After washing their feet, he put on his robe again and sat down and asked, "Do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right because that's what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done. I tell you the truth, slaves are not greater than their master, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them." Listen, that is literally the heart of Jesus. And so when we talk about this idea of not just settling for excuses, but literally this last series and where we're at as Sandals Youth, we're at a crossroads. It's either gonna be excuses or we are gonna go into somewhere that we've never been before. But that is only done because of Jesus. So here's your first point. That if it's when you know Jesus, that it is impossible to remain the same. Like it is completely impossible to remain the same. And when we talk about going somewhere we've never been before, that requires change. And so again, we're talking today that we can't have what God has meant for us without Jesus. So that is why we're looking at what Jesus' heart is. And what you didn't see in those verses was a list of excuses of why he wouldn't wash his feet. You never hear Jesus being like, "I'm more of the introverted type, like getting in people's space, let alone their feet, it's not really my thing." You don't hear him saying, "But I'm the one that they're learning from. Like they should be washing my feet." You definitely don't hear him saying, "But if I were to get down on my knees and wash their feet, what would that make people think of me? I can't do that." You literally don't hear any excuses from Jesus. You just see his heart. And so hear me say this, that it doesn't matter where you're joining us from today. It doesn't matter what your story is. It doesn't even matter how you're wired. I want you guys to hear me say this, that the heart of Jesus means having a heart of service. I'm gonna say that again. The heart of Jesus means having a heart of service. And this is what I love about this scene in the Bible is that it literally shows us what it looks like. We're not just talking about it, but it literally shows us what Jesus' heart looks like. And it means having a servant's heart. And it means literally making yourself, like doing the lowest of low for the sake of building other people up. Because here's what happens. When we serve to build ourselves up, we miss it. When we serve to build our profiles and our likes up, we miss it. When we serve to even just build our reputation and our platforms up, we miss it. When we serve to build ourselves, we miss it. And even more, we displease God. Because here's the thing, God, the one that we just read about, Jesus, he is the God that promises that those with the servant's heart will be blessed. Literally that they will be blessed. And let me just say that if you want to reach somewhere that you've never been before, that is what it means to be blessed. And again, I believe that God doesn't just want us to stay here, but I really do believe that what God has meant for us was meant for far more than we were meant to see on our own. But having a servant's heart, being able to accept and experience the promises of God, that is hard and it is tough. And it's because we literally just focus on ourselves. I know I said that earlier, but even in this room tonight, wherever you're at, I guarantee when you walked in, you weren't looking at who's sitting by themselves, this and that. You were probably walking in thinking, who am I gonna sit with? And sure, it's understandable. Maybe you don't have all the friends, but you're missing out. And I know this not just from myself. I know this not just from you guys. I know this because it's literally been happening for years. We're gonna look at literally the same scene, but a little bit later in Luke 22, and it says this. He took some bread and gave thanks to God for it. Then he broke it into pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." After the supper, he took another cup of wine and said, "This cup is the new covenant between God and his people, an agreement confirmed with my blood, which is poured out as a sacrifice. But here at this table, sitting among us as a friend, is the man who will betray me. For it has been determined that the Son of Man must die." But what sorrow awaits the one who betrays him? The disciples began to ask each other which of them would ever do such a thing. Then they began to argue amongst themselves about who would be the greatest among them all. Let me just say, this scene was one of the most intimate scenes with Jesus ever. Like, it was after he just had this intimate moment with them, washing their feet. And now they're at the table about to share a meal. And this is literally Jesus' last meal because he's about to die. And then the disciples, they start arguing amongst themselves, and then they just literally start making it about themselves. And literally to the point where they ruined the moment. And I know we've all been there or had moments where things are set up perfectly, and then the moment gets ruined. But that picture in the Bible and the stories about the disciples and Jesus, is that not us? Because I'm pretty sure if we were all honest with ourselves that we know that we've had moments like those. You know, and this scene is literally almost who we are, like in our nature and who we are of where Jesus meets us, is that we have moments with Jesus. Some of you are familiar of whether it's a weekend where you're listening and you're hearing the message, and it's those weekends where the message just feels like it's talking right to you, but then we miss it. Or some of us have and experience these close moments with Jesus at summer camp or during worship, and we experience Jesus in these close moments, in these close ways, but then things change. And what happens is that we forget. We forget who Jesus is. We forget who Jesus is. We forget what his heart is like. The heart of Jesus, literally, again, we cannot go into things that we've never been before. We cannot attain what God has always meant for us without meeting Jesus, without his heart. So we literally can't afford to forget the heart of Jesus. And so here's what happens, is that we literally just focus on ourselves. But let me ask you guys, wherever campus you're at right now, wherever you're at, I don't know what your story is or wherever your life is at, where you're at with God, but I do want to ask you this tonight. I want to ask you, no matter, again, how long you've been coming to Sandals or if you know Jesus or not, but I want to ask you this. Do you want to know what it is that your life is called to be? Do you want to know what it means or maybe even how to have a life that is so fulfilling? Do you want to know maybe what that more that God has meant for you is? Do you want to know those things? And so, yeah, it's tough to have a servant's heart, but this is why it's so worth it. So here's the other thing. We need to do this. I want you guys to write this down. We need to move our eyes from self to have eyes to serve. I'm going to say that one more time. We need to move our eyes from self to have eyes to serve, because here's what happens. When we focus on ourselves, it's more than just ruining a moment like the disciples did. It's more. It's literally missing out on the more that God has for you, that your life was always meant to be. That is what it is. And let me just say this, that our souls were meant for more than ourselves. And I'm going to say this to you tonight joining us, that literally your soul was meant for more. And so what do? So here's what happens, and here's why it is so important that we do need to just change the way that we see things. That if we're talking about the more and not being able to get that unless we have Jesus, unless we have his heart, it is so important that we need to change how we see things. Because when we gain perspective, we start to gain an understanding of our purpose. So I want to do just a quick check with you guys to just see where you're at. And just these two questions is this. When it comes to your life, like honestly, like when it comes to your life sitting here tonight, do you know what your life is called for? Do you know what the calling God has in your life is? Like in an actual way, not like in a cheesy, yeah, I come every Wednesday night kind of way, but do you actually know what your life is called for, what the purpose of your life is? And let me ask this, just follow up to that first question, is when it comes to knowing Jesus, how close would you say you are? How's your perspective of Jesus? Because when it comes to your perspective of life, maybe you don't know your purpose, but let me just ask this. Maybe it's because you don't have the right perspective of Jesus. And let me just ask the second question, that when it comes to Jesus, and if Jesus' heart is a heart of service, how close is your heart to Jesus' heart? So I want to leave you guys with these two thoughts to think about. That when we serve, when we have this heart of service, we grow closer to God and we grow closer to others. But here's the second thing that we also do. we grow closer to our purpose. Ephesians 2:10 says this, "For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do good things he planned for us long ago." Good things he planned for us long ago. So no matter where you're at with God, no matter if you've been joining us for tonight, the first night, God has planned for you that he has meant for even so much longer than you can even imagine. Like, I can't even talk right. Like, literally, that's how crazy just God's plan is for you. And so what if tonight, what if this Wednesday isn't just about being dragged in and walking in because of your parents, but what if it is about walking out closer to your purpose? But again, we're never gonna attain this, God has far more meant for me. We're never gonna get that on our own. And so it requires us to change the way that we see. And when you grow, you can't grow closer to your purpose without growing closer to Jesus. And when you grow closer to Jesus, you will see that it points to a heart of service. So right now, I'm gonna invite your youth lead or your host to come up and just share with you, now what? Now what does it look like? And where do I start with having a heart of service? Have a great week, guys, and enjoy your time in groups.